On February 12, 2014, the largest budget in the history of the Virgin Islands was passed as the government moves the territory towards stability and growth. But what does this mean for the people of the Virgin Islands? What is the government expected to deliver in the coming months with the passage of the 2014 budget, and how will it be done? Tonight, these questions and more will be answered on this exclusive Public Eye as we review the 2014 budget. A special welcome to those tuning in live on ZBVI 780 AM. I am your host for this program, GIS Information Officer, NADIA James Harris. My special guest tonight is Premier and Minister of Finance, Dr. the Honorable D. Orlando Smith, OBE. Later in the program, we'll be joined by Financial Secretary in the Ministry of Finance, Mr. Neil Smith, and Deputy Financial Secretary in the Ministry, Ms. Pat Leanne Johnson. Premier, welcome to the program.
Good evening, Nadia. Thank you.
Premier, what is your vision for the territory as our leader?
As leader of BVI, Nadia, and vision a better BVI, a prosperous BVI, where it's ideal to live, to work, to visit, and to do business in. A BVI where the people of the BVI have a high standard of health, where the people also have and appreciate and enjoy a high standard of education. Because these two things are almost considered human rights. Yes. And those are things that we aim to provide for the people of the BVI.
And Premier, you wear two hats as Minister and Premier, Minister of Finance and Premier. How do you balance these responsibilities?
It could be difficult, Nadia, but fortunately, I have with me staff in both ministries who are dedicated, who are willing to work, who understand what the issues are, and put themselves to the task, headed by two very dependable persons, the Financial Secretary, Ms. Neil Smith on one hand, and Mr. Broderick Penn, the Permanent Secretary in the Premier's office on the other hand. These two young men and their team advised me and assisted me extremely well. That makes it much easier and enjoyable. Excellent.
And Premier, how does the Minister of Finance tell the Premier no?
It is perhaps easier for the Minister of Finance to tell the Premier no under the present circumstances where the Premier and the Minister of Finance are the one and the same person. It might be more difficult where the Minister of Finance is a different person, has different ideas. But however, what we do when we are considering the budget, we look at what the priorities are, what each ministry puts up, and we don't concentrate on because the minister wants this, we consider what is best for the territory, and we prioritize in that way. And so, you know, if the Minister of Education has a greater slice of the budget, which he does, that's okay, because that is what we consider priority.
And speaking of the budget, Premier, what is your biggest challenge that you encounter when balancing the budget?
That's an interesting question. The biggest challenge perhaps is meeting the expectations of everyone concerned, meeting the expectation of the ministers and ministries. All the ministers of government, whether they're Minister of Education, Minister of Health, Minister of Natural Resources, Minister of Communication Work, they're all interested in delivering on their promises to the people of the British Virgin Islands. But in delivering those promises, every minister, every ministry has their ideas, what they'd like to see. But in the end, we only have a certain limited budget. And so we have to decide what goes into the budget. And so you have to sit down and prioritize. Sometimes also it means that one minister may not get exactly what he wants. It also means because the ministry doesn't get exactly what we want, then a particular segment of the community may not get exactly what they want at a particular time. But even though we are, the budget continues to grow, we still have to prioritize because there are so many demands.
That's true. And as a leader of the territory, we've done so much, the government has done so much over the last 2 years. What would you say are some of our major accomplishments?
I think what we have done actually is restored In my opinion, restored confidence of the people of the British Virgin Islands in their government, that the government can deliver. We've done this through different ways. For example, we've concentrated in the first year on revising the financial management system so that we can be more accountable to the people of the British Virgin Islands. That goes a long way. Having done that, we're then able to look at the loans, the debts which we inherited, and we're able to pay those off. And that is significant. So now we're in a situation where we've got a revised financial management system, we've paid off with it, so we are poised for growth.
Poised for growth.
And that can be seen in the kind of budget which we have passed this year. We've got more than $55 million in capital projects, which is the largest we've had for quite some time.
Thank you, Premier. Some of us have heard of the Oprah effect, where everything she touches seems to just blow up. Is there an Orlando effect?
I am really dedicated to what I'm doing, and so my fellow ministers and all the members of caucus, we are committed to seeing that the BVI develops and becomes prosperous. And the things I mentioned earlier, we have good health system, good education system. We're all dedicated to that purpose.
So health, education, we're on the ball with communications and the environment.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you, Premier. At this time, we will take a short commercial break, and when we return, we will hear from our Financial Secretary in the Ministry of Finance, as well as our Deputy Financial Secretary, Ms. Pat-Leanne Johnson. Stay tuned, we'll be right back.
Did you know, in South America, Europe, and North America, the BVI is marketed as a premier Caribbean destination for business or pleasure? This is thanks to travel agent familiarization trips and overseas marketing campaigns such as Girls Night Out, Just For You, and Chill at 85 Degrees. Also, the mobile app BVI IT is bringing sunshine, the beach lifestyle, and a taste of the BVI straight to the users' smartphones. The government of the Virgin Islands, moving the territory towards stability and growth.
In a world where there are so many sources of Virgin Islands government information, there can only be one official source of Virgin Islands government news. www.bvi.gov.vg, your official source for government information.
Welcome back to our exclusive Public Eye, where we are speaking on what the government is doing to move the territory towards stability and growth. Our guests tonight are the Premier Minister of Finance, Dr. the Honorable D. Orlando Smith. We have the Financial Secretary in the Ministry of Finance joining us, Mr. Neil Smith, and we have the Deputy Financial Secretary joining us, Ms. Pat-Leanne Johnson. Welcome to the program.
Good evening.
Premier Smith, there has been a lot of talk regarding the necessity of building the reserve fund. A lot. What is the importance of building our reserves? Tell us about that.
You're quite right that much has been said about the fact that we are saving money. But it reminds me of saying that one of my colleagues has often repeated in the House of Assembly. He reminds people of the time of plenty and the time of famine, that you should save during the time of plenty, so you'll have grain stored up for the time of famine. That is exactly it. When we have reserves, we're then able to look after ourselves if there's any man-made or natural disaster. You know, you must have seen what happened recently in St. Vincent, St. Lucia, and other countries. There was a significant disaster, and there were challenges. It is good to prepare for such challenges. That's what we're doing. And that's what any responsible government should do.
And speaking about the preparing for challenges and being financially responsible, how does the government determine priority areas for capital investment?
There are three broad areas that are priority for the government. That is the economy building, the economy growing, the economy getting a strong economy, 1. 2, health. 3, education, of course. And then, of course, there's the environment. Okay? But the main things, the economy, health, and education. And when you're looking at what you need to do, we look at first what you need to do to build the economy. And building the economy means doing capital projects or doing other things that will lend towards building the economy. For example, that is why we are building the cruise ship dock, because we expect that to contribute significantly to the influx of cruise tourism visitors, and therefore more monies and more business into the hands of local. That is just one example of what you're doing. When you're speaking about health, we have just completed building a hospital, and that is extremely important for the people of the British Virgin Islands. So it's easy to see how we prioritize, the things that are necessary. We sit down, we have a basket of things, things we'd like to see done, but we discuss them and say, okay, this is necessary because it'll help to build the economy, so that we can provide health, education, etc. for the people of the territory.
Thank you, Premier. We've heard a lot of discussion about so many different things, the reserves, the protocols, and I want to take a few minutes for us to talk about signing the protocols, what the government signed the protocols, and it seems like a negative document. Share your thoughts on that. What is going on?
The protocols.
Yes.
The protocols are just protocols. What they are, they're just simply a guide to help to guide us in how we spend, how we take care of the people's money. For example, the protocols tell us that we shouldn't borrow too much. And you yourself know that many countries have been borrowed so much in debt that they spend most of their recurrent revenue paying off debt. That is a situation we should not get into. The protocols tell us that if you're going to do a major project, we should have the correct expertise to advise on that project. And that is just common sense. The protocol tells us about reserves, which I spoke to a while ago. This is something that we should have done many years ago. Right? And it's something that we started to do, something that is important, I think, which any responsible government would do if they care for the people of the territory and want to be fiscally responsible.
Thank you, Premier. FS. I'm going to call you FS because we're not in the ministry, we're on the set, so I'm going to call you FS. How does the government balance saving as opposed to investing in infrastructure?
Well, it's always a delicate balancing act. And, we have to, first of all, we look at the priorities of government. We look at the goal that they want to meet in terms of long-term sustainability, the protection of the people of this country, because you can't have a government functioning if they run out of money, for example. So it's a delicate, a knife edge, if you will, to balance how do you protect your long-term goals or your long-term sustainability of the government ability to meet its obligations with economic development, which is, as in addition to what the Premier is saying, is a major trust of his government. If you look at the manifesto, if you look at the development plans that they've created after that, or the Ministry of Finance has created for him, after that you'll realize that economic growth is a major initiative for the government, because they understand that for us as a BVI to continue to be a viable economy that is one where people want to continue to live, where people have the opportunity to provide for their families, educate the children, all of those type of things, you need economic growth. And, government has a number of ways it could raise revenue in order to meet the obligations that it has to the people. One of those could be raising taxes. The Premier and his colleagues have intentionally tried to avoid that by, again, doing things to facilitate economic growth. And, because if you have a growing economy, a flourishing economy, and even with the existing tax regime that you have, you'll have a higher revenue coming into government. But it's always a very delicate balance between protecting and being in a position where you don't find yourself in trouble, not having enough money to pay salaries and those type of things, and doing the projects, engaging in initiatives that would be necessary to promote the economy so that you could, build it.
And speaking of making sure that government has enough money to run and promoting the economy and facilitating economic growth, private sectors and public sectors throughout the world have been encouraged to do more with less.
Yes.
Strategize their spending. The BVI public service is no exception. You hear it all the time. Get creative, get innovative, think outside the box. What are your thoughts on this?
I think it's absolutely necessary, not just essential, but necessary to provide value for money for the taxpayer. The taxpayer, they had on dollars. There are people in the society who work 2, 3 jobs, and these hard-working individuals make their contribution to the upkeep of their society through taxes. And I think that we have a responsibility to them as central government, and I think the Premier understands that very, very well, that the more that we could get out of each tax dollar, each tax contribution, as you will, would be better for all of us. And it's part of his responsibility to do good by his people, by the people of the Virgin Islands, to be as efficient as possible and as effective as possible as well, to stretch, so to speak, these, our people's hard-earned money to do as much as possible that can be done. It's absolutely essential, not just for survival, but I think as good custodians of the territory in leadership positions, I don't think that our leaders have any choice on that, really, if they're being responsible.
What I often tell the FS and other people is that if you got $100 and you can do 5 things with it, why should you just do 2 things?
Right.
That is a classic example.
You're employing the same number of people, but you're getting more bang for your buck, and therefore the people of that country benefit more.
Thank you, FS. Thank you, Premier. We're hearing the words efficiency, effective, financial custodian, and DFS. I'm going to call you DFS because my thing stands we're not in the ministry, we're on a set, so I can use that. We've also heard the medium-term fiscal plan, which summarizes efficiency, effectiveness, and financial custodianship. Why is it necessary to have such a plan? What is it? Why is it necessary?
Thank you, Nadia. I know there are a lot of different terms and floating around. So the medium-term fiscal plan, in a nutshell, is the tool that ensures that the government is managing its resources to the best of its ability, to ensure, like the FS said, that the taxpayers are getting value for their money. So that's essentially what it is. Just permit me to use an example to explain to the public how it has been developed and how it's going to be useful to ensure that their money is managed properly. For example, if there's a household and they want to prepare a budget, which households do, but instead of developing a 1-year budget, they decide that they're going to sit down and develop a 3-year budget, which is what medium term means. So medium term means we're looking not only at 1 year in advance, but we're looking at 3 years in advance. So they sit down, determine, okay, let's see what our budget is going to look like for the next 3 years. How are we going to do this? They might use information from the past, so look at their income levels in the past. They also might look at their expenditure patterns in the past, how much they're going to spend on food, how much they're going to spend on entertainment, how much they're going to spend on travel. And they develop a plan based on that, on those past performances. So also they're going to look at what they plan to do in the future. So they're going to look at, okay, are we going to increase the size of our family? Are we going to buy a new car? Are we going to build a house? Are we going to go on vacation? So they need to plan for these things in the future. So they're going to also look at how they're going to finance these things. Are they going to look for other sources of income? Are they going to get a loan from a bank? What information do they need? What resources or reserves do they need in order to go to the bank to negotiate a loan? So that same analogy can be used for government. We're doing it obviously on a much bigger scale, but we're looking at past performance of the government in terms of money that they have brought in, past expenditure, to sort of paint a picture for the future. So that's basically what we call the baseline, how things will look in the future if we continue our past, our previous trends. Then we think, okay, if there's a situation where government expenditure in, say, 3 years from now is outstripping government revenue that's coming in, then we can see, okay, there's a problem. So today we can plan for that difference or that over expenditure by implementing various government policies, whether we look at increasing revenue or whether we look at reducing expenditure. The good thing or the valuable thing about preparing a medium-term fiscal plan or using it as a tool is that we're not just operating in the present. We have an idea of how things are going to look at in the future, and therefore the government can make much better decisions, and the taxpayer can get value for money.
Thank you. Value for money. We're hearing some really good terms coming up, and I hope that our listeners, our audience, are taking notes because these are strong, powerful financial concepts. Value for money. Premier, let's recap some of our government's major accomplishments to date. Speaking of value for money, and where do you see this year's budget taking the territory?
One of the significant things in this year's budget is that we have a significant capital budget this year. And it's to the tune of about 52 million plus about another 37 million.
Yes.
$52 million for central government, plus another $37 in via the ports in the investment. That's a significant capital investment program. And we're able to do this because we have been prudent over the past couple of years and setting the stage now, paying off our bills, and setting the stage now for making these kind of investments so that we can end up having great employment of peoples and having projects that will bring revenue to the country once they're completed. For example, one of the major things we're doing, as I mentioned earlier, was the cruise dock. That's important. One of the and in the works in communication, we're also looking at our roads infrastructure. Today we signed one of those CDB projects for fixing rehabilitating the roads. And we also have there are about maybe 8 or 9 of those. This is the first one. We also have within the budget monies for maintenance and to fixing our major roads. We all know that there are potholes in the roads. We accept that. And so we've started to do something about it and to make sure that their roads are fixed properly. Those are some of the things we're doing. Of course, in the area of health, I mean, everybody's seen what's happening. We've just opened, been handed over the keys for the New People's Hospital. And I think all the people who have visited so far have been raving about it. We've started work on the new Adina Dunham's home because we appreciate that we must provide the best we can for our seniors. We have plans for the mini hospital or the clinic in Virgin Gorda out for tender. So we are basically making serious investments for the future as far as health, as far as infrastructure is concerned, and education. We're looking at providing the technical school, building the technical school, so young people who are otherwise engaged will be able to really develop skills that we actually do need in this territory. Yeah. We, for example, making our CXC exams mandatory. And the purpose of that is to elevate and lift the standard of education so that we'll be able to be more competitive on the world stage.
Thank you, Premier. That is an excellent report in terms of the government moving the territory towards stability and growth.
But what I think, there are many things I could mention, but what I must mention is the business bureau that has been created. We started that several years ago and has re-energized it and got us going. This is important because it is important if a country is to grow that we have small and medium-sized businesses going, because they're the ones that generate and circulate the monies in the country. So we started the Business Bureau, and so far it's loaned about, I think, at least 7 persons have received benefits from the Bureau. And the Bureau will continue to perform both in giving assistance to people and also in giving training, which is just as important. Training people how to prepare proposals for the banks, training people how to manage their budget, how to manage their business. These are important because apart from having to start a business, we want to make sure that the business is also successful. That's some of the things that we've been doing and we'll continue to do.
As I said before, it's an amazing report. I think it's an excellent report. We've heard the road rehabilitation program. We've heard about the cruise pier, the New People's Hospital, the work that is being done to move forward with the new Adina Donovan home, the new technical and vocational school, the National Business Bureau, and what is being done to revitalize that program. And again, the government moving the territory towards stability and growth. And DFS, I'm coming back to you. A part of all of this process, a part of good governance is public sector reform. What is it and why is it so important?
The public sector reform is something that the Ministry of Finance has been engaged in for quite a few years. The public might not necessarily see right now or at the tangible benefits of it, but we've been doing a lot of work behind the scenes. So public sector reform is, again, ensuring that the government has proper financial management systems in place so that they can manage the resources properly, ensure that they have money, as the Premier said, to develop the territory, from capital investment programs, from developing health, education, and also ensuring that there is economic growth within the territory. So there are a lot of things that we have been doing behind the scenes to ensure that this happens. One of the major things is to ensure that the Premier, the Minister of Finance, has information so that he and his cabinet can make the proper decisions. So one of the major things that we have done is the development, as I said earlier, of the medium-term fiscal plan, to be able to forecast our fiscal situation so that the ministers can make the proper decisions and can see where the territory is going based on the decisions that they're making, and maybe might have to adjust a few things. We have also, one of the key things is improving our financial statistics. Before you can plan, before you can identify where you're going, you need to know where you are. And that was one of our hindrances. We do not have a proper grasp of our financial situation. But now I can say with confidence that we do. It has taken a couple of years to get everything in order. But we have a better idea of what our situation was in the past and what it is at the present time. We have done a lot of reform in terms of the Treasury, developing a new chart of accounts so that we actually know what government is spending its money on. In the past, we weren't exactly sure, but now we can see how much money is being spent in education, how much money is being spent in health, how much money is being spent in infrastructural projects. So that has been a lot of work, but we have come a long way. A couple of things that we are continuing to work on is what we call cash flow forecasting and management. So it's the same thing. Government finance is we can relate it quite easily to what people do at home. So a household on a monthly basis, see how much money they are bringing in, look at their expenditure, and plan on a monthly basis. So we want to ensure that that happens to the government. So we don't only prepare the annual budget, but we look at our expenditure on a monthly basis and make adjustments depending on how our revenue situation looks like. There are a plethora of other things but that we have been working on, but it's all major ones for now.
At this point, we are going to take a short commercial break, and when we return, we're going to hear more on what is expected to be delivered and how as the government moves towards stability and growth. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Did you know that the BVI recently hosted a regional forum where health professionals, engineers, architects, and disaster managers from several Caribbean countries have joined their colleagues in the British Virgin Islands to discuss smart hospitals? These are hospital facilities that combine disaster resilience and environmental friendliness to better serve patients and provide improved working conditions for healthcare workers. Dr. Van Alphen, the regional advisor of the Pan American Health Organization, said it is their desire that all new hospitals being built in the Caribbean will include safety and environmentally friendly measures to ensure sustained and cost-efficient operations. Did you also know the New People's Hospital Pledge Program was designed to accept and process all donations towards outfitting the New People's Hospital with the necessary equipment? The entire Virgin Islands community is welcome to start pledging contributions of any amount that will go towards outfitting the New People's Hospital. Pledge brochures can be obtained from the Ministry of Health and Social Development and the old annex of the People's Hospital. The government of the Virgin Islands, moving the territory towards stability and growth.
In moving the territory towards stability and growth, we have a number of capital projects slated to improve our healthcare system, our standard of living, stimulate our economy, promote sustainable development, and strengthen our international relations. Again, welcome back to our exclusive live public eye as we discuss the government's plans to move the territory towards stability and growth. During the final half hour of this program, around 8 o'clock, we will be opening the phone lines and you can call in with your questions. This is a live program. You can call in with your questions. Telephone number 468-2355. That number again is 468-2355. We have our Premier, we have our Financial Secretary, and we have our Deputy Financial Secretary who are on hand to answer all of your questions. FS, there's a process for the budget. Can you explain how the budget comes together, how it's formulated?
Well, what we've done in part of the reform that Ms. Johnson was speaking about has to do with, we call an improved budget process, one that is aimed at improving accountability of the government to the people of the country and also to improve or augment transparency in that process. So it's now a three-step process, three-stage budget process. The first step is, and these things are enshrined in the Public Finance Management Act now. The first step is for the government, the Minister of Finance would come forward with a budget policy statement. And that budget policy statement states in broad terms what his policy or what the government's policy would be for the next 3 years or so. Will we focus on economic growth, for example? Will we raise taxes? How will we raise revenue? What will be our basic fiscal strategies? Just in basic terms, that is presented to the House and can be debated, I guess, if that is found to be necessary. Based on that, we go to the next step, which is the creation of the medium-term fiscal plan that Ms. Johnson spoke about earlier. And that medium-term fiscal plan trickles down, as it were, as a more detailed version of the budget policy statement. And as Ms. Johnson was saying, the medium-term fiscal plan tells you today what the effects of your decisions on what will happen tomorrow, today. Decisions that you make today, this is the effect that they will have tomorrow. And it does as good as, as reasonable prediction as possible. So we create the medium-term fiscal plan, and that goes to the House again. That medium-term fiscal plan goes through a lot of iterations. The Minister of Finance, the Premier, all the cabinet ministers discuss it extensively, because that is the anchor for what we have grown to know as the budget document itself. The fiscal strategies are fleshed out, the effects the decisions will have are fleshed out, forecasts are made, and that medium-term fiscal plan is presented to the House, and again, opportunity for debate happens again. But you see how transparent the process is. The Premier or the Minister of Finance says, this is our policies going forward. They go a bit deeper. They go and they calculate the numbers, or we calculate the numbers, and that is presented to the House again. And that is the anchor on which the budget that we know, come to know as a budget, is anchored on. And that really is probably the most important part. From there, once that is agreed upon, then we go to the creation of the actual budget document that that people look to. But everything in that budget document, all the ceilings and the floors, as a result of what the medium-term fiscal plan says that we're going to do. Okay, so the budget that you see has already been, in a way, not in terms of the specific initiatives, but in terms of the fiscal strategies that are being employed and those type of stuff has been determined in the medium-term fiscal plan. The budget document goes to the House. That is debated quite extensively. And that is, we pass the Appropriation Act, which gives the Minister of Finance the authority to say that this is what we're going to spend, and the budget forms the schedule to that act. That is part of the financial reform or the public sector reform process, to make the processes that are involved in government, in the use and allocation of resources that the government has. That process has been done or augmented or improved in order to increase the accountability of the government and to increase the transparency in the entire process to the people. So you have 3 stages that you could bite into to debate or have discussions on.
Thank you, Abbas.
I think one of the things that is significant about the 3-step or the 3-year plan is that it allows the Minister of Finance, allows the government to plan more effectively. As Ms. Johnson said, it gives you a look into the future. So if we had a major project now that costs maybe $100 million, we can say, okay, this year we'll put $40 million. Next year we'll put $30 million, and next year $20 million. Because we have, from the medium-term plan, a projection of what revenues we expect this year, next year, and the following year, based on historical evidence and also the projections.
Projected behaviors.
Projected behaviors. And that's very important, because it gives more certainty. We know that we can do this, and we can deliver this project over this period of time. Yeah.
Just to add to what the FS was saying about the budget process, if you look at the budget book, you will see that it's much more transparent, that you can actually, persons picking it up can see how government is actually spending the money and what are the results, because we're moving towards performance-based budgeting. So it's not only spending, but it is measuring our performance after. The government has a strategy that they have developed, and the budget is really there to execute that strategy from a funding perspective. But it's important that we ensure that that strategy is actually achieved. So what we're trying to do now is not just have a budget where we have figures listed in terms of what projects and how they're costed, but departments and ministries need to measure their performance. So we need to know that the money that we are giving the departments, or the money that we are using for a particular program or project, is actually reaching the results that we intended to achieve. So that's another change that persons will see. Also, just to add that the budget process does not stop when the budget has been passed. The budget is not a static document. It's something that is going to be constantly revised because we don't know what's going to happen. We try to predict what's going to happen in the future, but we don't know for certain. So if there's a situation during the year that there is a reduction in funds flowing in, or the government has a windfall, adjustments need to be made to the budget to deal with that. So it's a process that is continuous throughout the year, and it does not stop when the budget has been approved by the House.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. The budget allows us to plan efficiently. We have performance management, which is going on with the budget. We also have the fact that it is not a static document, and all of these are part of the strategy, the government strategy to move the territory towards stability and growth. Premier, we keep hearing that. We know it's the theme. It's what we want to say. We're saying it. If you had to address a group of students, if you have to break that theme down, if you had to break it down for them, a group of students at the Elmore Stout High School, how would you explain it to them?
What I would say essentially is that over the past several years, as the world economy slowed down, so has the BVI economy, as was expected, because BVI is part of the world, part of the global network. Right? Because of the slowdown, there has been an accumulation of debt, and therefore we, when we came into office, needed to do something about it to try to stimulate the economy, try to take care of this debt. If we're able to take care of the accumulated debt was there, then we'd be in a position to start to build on the economy. And so that's what we concentrated on first, by looking after financial management systems to try to make that more effective, and then tackling the debt that was in a systematic way. Now, having done that, we're able to demonstrate our capacity, our ability in management, and therefore we're now able to access the money that we need to make in major investments, which is the springboard for moving forward.
Thank you, Premier. You also wear the hat of Minister of Tourism. 3 hats.
Correct.
3 hats. And tourism is known as one of our twin pillars. But it can be said that there can be no tourism without our environment. We've spoken a lot about so many other things going on, and we have the environment as well that is the foundation on which tourism can be built. What are your views?
That is absolutely correct. There's no tourism without a good environment. And I think we are blessed as a people, as a country, with the natural environment which we have inherited. The beautiful seas, the hills, the beaches. And that is what started our tourism in the first place. You know, the natural beauty, the sailing that started it, and the diving, and then along came the hotels afterwards. So it is up to us to maintain that environment in as pristine a way as possible so that it could continue to sustain us. You know, we need to continue to look after our beaches. For example, they are one of the issues that we had over the years before we were aware of it. We filled up our ponds, not knowing what was the purpose of those ponds. And because we filled the ponds, there was runoff from the hills, especially when you cut foundations into the sea. That is something we have to address. And in one of the development projects that we had a few years ago, we had built monies in to help to resuscitate some of these ponds. And it's something we have to look after again. Because when we resuscitate the ponds, then any runoff can be drained before it goes into the sea and disturbs the beaches. We have to look at the way the yachts and other boats operate in our waters. We have to make sure that they are holding tanks. We have to make sure that there are pump-out stations in the territory so that there's no pollution, continued pollution into our waters. There are many things that we need to do to help to protect the environment. And I think listening to and speaking to my colleague and all the time constant dialogue, we know that the Ministry of Natural Resources is working very hard towards exactly that, protecting the environment. And the Minister, the Honorable Dr. Kedrick Pickens, is very dedicated to that purpose.
Thank you, Premier. We've heard about tourism and the fact that the environment is important to promoting our tourism product. We've heard about the BVI being marketed as the premier tourist destination in the Caribbean for both visitors as well as trade relations as a conference venue. FS, what is the importance of international relations in the marriage between the BVI tourism and sending the message that we have an international affairs secretariat?
It is important for us to realize that the BVI is not in an isolated environment. We are part of what we like to call a global village. And just as if you're in a crowd, if you have good relationships with the individuals in that crowd, it's easier to do business with them. And that is the premise on which the BVI stands when it has determined that we need to have good international relations. It helps with doing business. If people have confidence in the BVI, have good relationships with the BVI, they will say, the BVI is there. Let's have our conference there, where the sun is bright and the sand is white and the seas are blue. But if we don't have a relationship, if we stand off on the side, and there's no relationship with our fellow neighbors in this village that we call the world, then it's a lot more difficult for that to happen. And there are many things that have happened in recent times. Well, a few notable events that have happened in recent times that is built on the fact that our ministers, like the Premier and other ministers, having good relationships with their colleagues around the world. And people, these relationships are fostered in large part to the fact that people around the world have some confidence in the BVI, that we govern ourselves well, that we are forward-thinking, that we are agile, and that we are a country or territory that is good to be in partnership with. No matter how small we are, we might be small, but we have a big image, if I might say so. So it's important for economic development.
That is why I guess we have reestablished the International Affairs Secretariat.
Yes.
Because that is the arm of the Premier's office that sort of is responsible for that whole international aspect of things. And from that office, we have got, for example, the London office was set up many years ago, which has served us well, both in tourism and financial services, and the relationship with the United Kingdom and the EU. We've recently established, for example, the Hong Kong office, which has also been very effective and has really established good relationships with business people in Hong Kong and also business people in the other parts of China. So as we continue to build on our network through training our people in that area and establishing various offices, we're able to extend the reach, both from the point of view of tourism, from the point of view of financial services, and also from the point of view of other types of business ventures.
Thank you, Premier. Tourism development in the international market. We have been marketing the BVI through a number of campaigns. We're touching the Brazilian market, South American, North American. We already have a presence there. What are your thoughts? What is the update in terms of tourism development on an international front?
The Tourist Board is the arm of the government that promotes the industry, the marketing arm. And as such, they are responsible for, seeing that the world outside at large knows what the BVI has to offer as far as being a tourism destination. And that is why their office is established in New York, for example. There's been an office for many years. Also, the office is established in London. And I know that the office in London and all the offices has been doing quite well, because at the beginning of my term this year, I charged the Tourist Board that I want to see a 10% increase in visitors during this season. Now, they haven't quite got to the 10% as yet, but they're getting there, because this past season has been considerably better than the season before. And I expect with a continued effort on their part, we'll continue to grow that business.
Thank you, Premier. FS, we've spoken so much about so many different things as it relates to the BVI on the international scene with the International Affairs Secretariat, the tourism marketing that we're doing, and the different things to push to stimulate the economy. What is the general outlook for the BVI economy with all that is happening?
In one word, it is good. One of the reasons why it was so important to engage in these reforms in the public sector was that prior, we were kind of stabbing in the dark. We were doing things in the present, and we had no idea of what the actual status quo was, because the information was not as robust or strong. I don't want to use the word robust. It wasn't as strong or as it should be. But with having a medium-term fiscal plan, with having a budget process that is iterative and is continual, being able to look at the economy, looking at certain indicators and seeing the trends over a particular time, seeing the effect that interventions that are being done by government have on the current status quo. I think we could say with not just a little confidence, but a lot of confidence, that the prospects for the future of the BVI is good. And if we continue along the current trend, I believe that will become very apparent to everyone in the BVI and those that are looking on, that the BVI is on the up and up, so to speak, to use slang.
Thank you, FS. The BVI is on the up and up. I like that. That sounds good. We want to take this time to remind our listeners that this is a live show. It is a live public eye, an exclusive public eye with our Premier, our Deputy Financial Secretary, and our Financial Secretary as we discuss the government's efforts to move the territory towards stability and growth. At this time, we are going to take a short commercial break, and when we return, please give us a call, 468-2355. We know you have questions after hearing what we've been sharing this evening. 468-2355. We'll be right back after this short break.
Did you know work is underway to upgrade the legislation surrounding energy use and generation? This means that 4,300 LED and solar streetlights are to be installed around the BVI. This upgrade is expected to reduce the cost of street lighting throughout the territory by as much as 40%. Government buildings have also begun to benefit from the installation of energy-saving LED lights. The government of the Virgin Islands, moving the territory towards stability and growth.
Welcome back to our exclusive Public Eye, where we are discussing the budget, the 2014 budget, and the efforts that the government is making to move the territory towards stability and growth. Again, our special guests, Premier and Minister of Finance, Dr. the Honorable D. Orlando Smith. We have our Financial Secretary in the Ministry of Finance, Mr. Neil Smith, and one of the Deputy Financial Secretaries in the Ministry of Finance, Ms. Pat Leanne Johnson. And we've been having a very, very interesting and informative discussion on the budget process, what it means, the capital investment projects, the plans that the government is using to take this territory towards stability and growth. And this is the segment, this is the time where our listeners, our viewers, we welcome your call. The number is 468-2355. Please feel free to call, get your questions answered on the budget process and what we've been discussing here tonight. Premier, there have been a lot of concerns about the road networks, and you mentioned earlier some of the potholes that we've had to face on driving through. Can you briefly elaborate on what the government's plans are to continue addressing these areas?
We have, since the government came into office, been addressing some of the areas of concern. And the roads have been fixed, several roads, but there continues to be, issues with roads, and this is normal. Roads, when they're built, need to be repaired from time to time, or overlaid, or resurfaced, or something. Right? Now, during the last government, they applied for loans from CDB to be able to fix some parts of the road that were damaged by the hurricane, and in 2012, we were able to access this after the British government had looked at it, and we agreed that the country was headed in the right direction. Let's take it slow enough and let's fix roads. So that is now available. And today, as I said earlier, we signed one of the first contracts for that in the area of Palestina. There are about 8 or 9 of those such contracts. And we will continue to roll those out until they're complete. So that those areas which have been identified will be fixed properly according to the guidelines established by the CDB. In addition, of course, the ministry that's responsible for road network have got plans to really fix the major roads and also the by roads where necessary. And this, of course, will depend on the budgetary allowance. In this year's budget, along with the monies from the CDB, there's also about $3.5 million for the roads network. And so that money will be utilized, along with any other money that will come later on, to do work on the major roads in the territory. Of course, the Public Works Department also has resources to maintain the smaller roads and to patch the roads, and so which they're actually doing right now.
Thank you, Premier. We have a caller on the line. Good evening. You are live on Public Eye.
Hello.
Hello. Good evening. You're live. Go ahead with your question.
Yes, Honorable Premier.
Hi.
You hearing me?
I can hear you.
Yes, Honorable Premier. Happy New Year.
Thank you.
Yeah, twofold question to you, Honorable Premier. Is there any sign on the horizon in terms of civil servants getting an increase before the next general election?
And
that's one. Number two, fire officers have not had an increase in their auxiliary allowance since 1993. That's some 21 years ago. I'll hang up and I'll listen, Honorable Premier.
That question has not been put to us by. That question has not been put to us by the Human Resources Department about increasing salaries for civil servants. And there was when was the last salary review? A few years ago.
Yeah.
Right?
I think it's 2006.
2006. Yes. And there will be salary reviews from time to time. But I cannot say at this moment that there will be a salary review this year or next year. Either for, in any of the civil servants or any other statutory bodies. I cannot say that at the moment. But I'm sure that when the situation is put to us by the Civil Service Association staff of the Deputy Governor's Office, then the matter will be looked into.
We were talking about the roads, and we mentioned the CDB, Caribbean Development Bank Loan Agreement. In layman's terms, the road rehabilitation program, how does this translate to moving the territory towards stability and growth?
When roads are fixed, it makes a huge difference. My FS was talking a while ago about nylon roads. It is important for the population, you and I, to have good roads to be able to get to work, because we don't want our vehicles to be damaged, and we want to be able to get to work safely. Also, it is important from the point of view of our building the economy, because when, our economy is based on tourism and financial services, which means that we depend on visitors coming to a show either for relaxation or for business. When people come here and will have relaxation or business, they want to be able to get to their destination in comfort without having to battle with major problems with roads. And once we do that, it makes the country more inviting and therefore more attractive to both visitors and business people. Hence, that interprets into helping to develop the good economy.
Thank you, Premier. DFS, we have heard a lot of financial terms being thrown around as we talk about developing the economy and the road rehabilitation project. Deficit financing, recurrent surplus. These are terms that I know the financial heads get quite excited about.
Unexcited.
Or unexcited. This is one time where we ask you to share the excitement and tell us budgeting 101, starting with deficit.
Okay. Deficit, I know that word has been floating around a lot, usually with a negative connotation. Deficit means, in layman terms, that you have spent more than you have brought in. In government, that could be bad depending on your situations, or it's not necessarily the end of the world. Usually, governments run deficit on what we call their recurrent balance. So that means the difference between their recurrent expenditure, which is the money that is used to, say, run the government, when you take into consideration the inflows, there might be a deficit or a surplus. If there's a surplus, that money could be used, as in the situation, our situation, used to fund our capital investment plan. So that's a good thing. Overall, you might have a deficit, but it just means that you have to know how you're going to finance that deficit. That's where the term financing your deficit comes in. So you can have a deficit, which most countries do, especially not on the recurrent side. So you shouldn't have, it's not prudent financial management to necessarily have a deficit, not being able to fund the government. It's not being able to pay salaries, not being able to purchase goods and services, not being able to pay suppliers for these goods and services. But you can have a deficit on the capital side, where you're looking at how you're going to finance it. So it can be financed through your recurrent surplus, which we have at the moment, and at that point you can look for loan financing, which we're also looking to finance our capital budget.
Recurrent.
And actually that is one of the reasons why it's so important to plan.
Yeah.
And why the medium-term fiscal plan and the three-stage budget process that the Premier has now is so important. Because we can actually engage in deficit financing, but we know exactly what the results would be. We know how we're going to fund that deficit, and it's just, you're not stabbing in the dark. You know exactly what you're doing. Or you know how much you could borrow safely. So that's very important. And I cannot overemphasize the importance of planning. It gives the same individuals that lend you the money, if you're planning and you have good fiscal strategies in place, they tend to give you more or give you funds on less prohibitive terms, which translates to the Premier having more funds to do other things with. So that's fundamental to plan properly and to do so in a responsible manner.
And we heard about, you just spoke about borrowing. What are borrowing limits? Are there borrowing limits that we have to stick within when we're dealing with the budget?
Yeah, there are borrowing limits which are part of the protocols and which existed before the protocols. They're just basically ratios that we need to ensure that we maintain. The popular one, the common one, is our liquid assets, which deals with our reserves. So that has to be a certain percentage of our recurrent expenditure. So we are trying to build up that level. The other ratios are dealing with our debt. As the FS said, it's important to anticipate how you're going to finance a deficit if you have one. And it is important to know exactly where that money is coming from, to ensure that you're not caught by surprise and you're in a situation like our other Caribbean countries where you have exceeded your debt ratios. So in our situation, we are within the debt ratios. We are able to service our debt comfortably, and also we have not reached the maximum limit in terms of the amount of money that we can borrow. So there is a situation where you don't want to overextend yourself, because as the Premier said earlier, what has happened in many countries is that the majority of their budget, their recurrent budget, is not to be, or their budget is not used to develop the country. It's not used to ensure that persons are paid on time, but it's used to finance debt. It's used to pay their principal and interest payments. And you never want to be in that sort of situation. So these ratios, which are in the protocols, are very important, and we're taking them seriously. And the medium-term fiscal plan gives us that view to ensure that once we are developing the strategies of the government, that we keep in mind these ratios to ensure that we don't reach them in the future.
And I'm going to go a little further to what Ms. Johnson said, is that this is not some fairy tale thing, something that could, some way out possibility. There are countries in the Caribbean who their deficit, right, or their loan portfolio is higher than the gross domestic product. I mean, 150%, 170%. And I don't think that the people in the BVI would really like it if the BVI get in a situation like that, because these countries have some problems. I'm aware of one of my colleagues who had to borrow just to keep the government running. That's ridiculous. We don't want to get in a situation like that. So it's good to be, what the Department of Disaster Preparedness says, management says, it's better to prepare
and prevent than to repair and repent.
Exactly.
Mitigate. Mitigate. And we have a caller. Yeah. Good evening, caller. You're live on Public Eye.
Hi, good evening. Good evening to the panel. Hi, Premier.
Good evening.
I have a two-part question. If, say, the government were to change in the next general election, what effect would that have on the medium fiscal plan that you guys are stressing so much about right now? And what effect will that change have in the current protocols that were signed by this government?
Well, I guess you want me to answer, Chief. The medium-term fiscal plan will still have to be produced. This framework would remain. The protocols for effective financial measurement would remain. The ratios that we need to maintain in there would remain. What you would notice is that some of the decisions might change. A successive government would decide that we want to have a smaller capital investment program or whatever they want to do. But the point is that those decisions that they make, the fiscal strategies that they put in place, would be reflected in the medium-term fiscal plan. It'll be there, available for everyone to see what will be the effect of these decisions. Right? So it is not this is not something that is for any particular government. This is to make sure that the people in the Virgin Islands are confident that their affairs are being managed responsibly, and if not, to see what the effect of those decisions are. Exactly. And the decisions of whether or not something is responsible could be subjective, but at least in an objective manner, in a clinical manner, you could see what the effect of the decisions that are being made, what the effect of the fiscal policies and stuff that you're using will have on the country into the future.
Yeah. And also to add to what the FS said, to ensure continuity, we have strengthened our Public Financial Management Act. So all of the reforms that we are undertaking right now are actually in legislation. So we're required by law to produce a budget policy statement, we're required by law to produce a medium-term fiscal plan. That medium-term fiscal plan has to be passed in the House, and it has to contain specific, it must cover specific areas. So all this is enshrined in the legislation to ensure that there's continuity regardless of a change in administration. Because at the end of the day, this is for the BVI. This is to ensure that whatever government is in place, the structures and the systems are in place to facilitate proper financial management, facilitate the proper use of resources going forward.
Thank you. Thank you, caller. We've heard about proper fiscal management. We've heard about the borrowing limits and the reserve fund. What is the link between borrowing limits and having a healthy reserve fund? Is there a link there?
It is most definitely a link. You know, it's the way I like to put it, the simplest way I like to put it, how I understand it, is if you're making a pie, and you don't put sugar. Sugar isn't one of the ingredients. You'll get something, but it won't be a pie. If you don't use flour, you'll get something, but it won't be a pie. So all of these things come together to create a situation that is one that could instill confidence. So everything is linked to each other. You have reserves, so you know that if you're borrowing at a particular level and you run into trouble where you shortfall, you experience a shortfall on your revenue intake, your reserves as would be a cushion that could survive for some time while you make up your mind on what else you're going to do to mitigate against this. If you don't have any reserves and you have a shortfall on revenue, because debt is one of the first calls, actually the first call on your accounts, and salaries for civil servants is somewhere down the line, you'll find that you have to not pay civil servants for a couple of months. With reserves, for example, you would know that you would be able to meet those debt payments. You'll be able to still pay civil servants. You'll still be able to pay for the scholarships that you funded. Right? So it's that allows things to happen in a smooth way. So everything is absolutely connected. And without one, you create a situation where you could you won't get a solid structure.
Thank you, FS. We have a caller. Okay. Caller, you are live on Public Eye. Good evening. Hi. Welcome.
Hi, good evening again. Just a follow-up to the last question. And now that you're speaking on the topic of reserve, you know, right now there's a lot of talk in the community about why save money, inject it in the economy, you know, pay the people so that our economy can move forward. If, again, the administration is changed at the next general election, how would that impact our reserves? Because we know some of the persons that are speaking are from the past administration, and they're saying spend the money. So can they just come in and clear the reserves by spending the money like they're saying?
It'd be a challenge to do that. But if they were to do that, then it would put the ability to be able to develop a proper budget, to be able to develop a proper medium-term fiscal plan, to develop a proper capital program to go forward will be very, very much compromised. Because once they do that, then they are back under more vigilance, so to speak.
Yeah, from the UK.
By the United Kingdom, I say that.
Yeah.
And and therefore there are more restrictions. It's the same thing that happened, for example, with the CDB loan. Right? The CDB loan was negotiated, but it was not. The British government didn't say, okay, you can access this. Right? And so you don't want to get into those kinds of situations. And I believe that any responsible government that comes, you know, whether it's our government or another government, will recognize by now the importance of having reserves, the importance of having proper fiscal management, the importance of having these guidelines to be able to make sure that you don't overspend and acquire this huge debt burden that is crippling to any society. Right? To make sure that you, when you do contracts or projects, that you get value for money by having the right resources to be able to monitor them. I think any responsible government will appreciate those things. And I don't see any difficulty going forward for the BVI.
Thank you, Premier. Thank you, Premier. There have been so many initiatives coming out of the Ministry of Finance. We spoke about a few of them this evening, the medium-term fiscal policy. We have spoken about the different terminologies in the financial world. What are the themes under the medium-term fiscal policy as we prepare to wrap our program up, just so that our listeners can have an idea? And again, we remind our listeners, our viewers, that the number to call in, if you have any questions, is 468-2355. Again, that number is 468-2355. In the final moments of the program, we listen and look out for your call.
So as the FS said earlier, that the medium-term fiscal plan is sort of like the roots. It's what really sets forth the whole budget process. The medium-term fiscal plan includes the development strategy of the government. That's where it starts. So the government outlines their development strategy. We have a development strategy which is based on the manifesto of the present government. So that highlights their strategy for the next 4 years in government. And what the medium-term fiscal plan does is put that in perspective. How much money or what they're going to do in terms of improving the social fabric of the BVI, investment in education and health. Also, specifically how they're going to grow the economy, focus on the environment, as the Premier mentioned earlier. And what we've been talking today is about governance, direction and governance. So those are the four themes of the development strategy, which is embedded in the medium-term fiscal plan: social, economic, environmental, direction, or governance. So that's like the foundation which sets the ball rolling. So once you have that overarching development strategy, from there you can then use that to develop your budget, and use that to develop further your economic and your fiscal strategies going forward.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. And where can the public get a copy of the medium-term fiscal development plan?
It's available on the Ministry of Finance's website, www.finance.gov. It's under the economy section.
Can you give our listeners, give our viewers that website again?
www.finance.gov.
Thank you. And as we prepare to wrap up our program, are there any last words from our panel? Is there anything else you'd like to leave the seeds of thought, plant some seeds that can flower and bloom?
We want to thank them for the patience with us over the past 2 years. And now that we are more in a better position as far as the BVI is concerned, we want you to be prepared to take advantage of the opportunities which are coming. I also want to encourage innovative thinking in the BVI, because we know that despite the fact that we have two major sectors of the economy, it is important to diversify as much as possible. And with the encouragement of the Business Bureau, which is actually, I've instructed them that must encourage innovation. Also with the encouragement of the college and the education system, we expect more of this type of innovative thinking to emerge so that we can diversify the economy of the BVI and make it more stable, make it more sound.
Thank you, Premier. FS?
I tend not to speak after the Premier, but what I'll do is just, support what he said with something else, and that is to the people at BVI should be inquisitive, ask the government questions.
Thank you. Thank you. In the words of the late John F. Kennedy, change is the law of life, and those who look only to the past or to the present are sure to miss the future. On this exclusive Public Eye, we've been discussing the 2014 budget and the economic development strategy designed to bring positive change to the territory as it moves towards stability and growth. There are some exciting new initiatives on the horizon as the BVI continues to forge its path in the pages of history. My guests have been Premier and Minister of Finance, Dr. the Honorable D. Orlando Smith, OBE, Financial Secretary in the Ministry of Finance, Mr. Neil Smith, and one of the Deputy Secretaries in the Ministry, Ms. Pat Leanne Johnson. As we close, we say thank you to all those who tuned in via radio and television. We also say a special thanks to the team at the Department of Information and Public Relations, ZBVI 780 AM, and CBN Channel 51, who made this evening's program possible. We invite you to visit the government website at www.bvi.gov.vg and follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube at BVI Government. I have been your host for this program, GIS Information Officer Nadia James Harris. It's been a pleasure having you with us this evening, and do enjoy the rest of your evening.